Hey, everyone. It's Frances Reeves, president of Parent Your Parents. And it's been a long time, it seems like, since I've been here. But today I have this great lady who I have worked with. Her name is Odelia Goldberg. And she, like me, is a lawyer and she practices real estate planning, and probate. And probate is where Odelia and I usually cross paths because I don't do the probate aspect. Probate is, and Odelia is going to explain more of it, but probate is what happens after you die.
Yes, that's a great intro. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me here today. I love the opportunity to speak, and anytime someone invites me, it's a win-win.
It is a win-win.
So the intro was wonderful, and probate is actually the formal process where a judge assists us in determining what happens to someone's assets when they pass away, when the universe doesn't know. So in Florida, if someone should pass away and they have an asset and that asset doesn't have a beneficiary, it isn't jointly owned with another individual, then the universe doesn't know what to do with it. Where will it go? And so at that point, we open a formal process in the courthouse called a probate. And at that point, the judge says, did this individual have a last will and testament? And then we would say, yes, Your Honor, here it is. And he says, oh, Frances and Odelia are the best lawyers, and he signs our orders.
Yes.
And if the individual doesn't have a last will, then the judge goes by the statute, and then the family inherits the assets. So either way, the assets go where the individual wanted them to, but we need to get a judicial order. A lot of times people think, I've created a last will. My estate is probate proof. I no longer have to worry about that. But the will does have to get probated. It just tells the judge what we want to happen. If we want the estate to be probate proof, what we have to do is make sure that we have a beneficiary designation and that we allocate each asset knowing where to go.
Mm-hmm.
And so that we do that with beneficiary designation forms for 401k, IRA, life insurance. We would do that with a trust, for example,
Mm-hmm.
or an LLC. We would do it with jointly held assets. And in the case of bank accounts, savings and checking accounts, we would want to make sure that there is a payable on death beneficiary on those accounts. And that would avoid probate.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Trust is the other thing you and I do.
Yes.
So let's talk about a lot of people, you're right, do not understand that probate is what happens after a will,
Mhm.
but not after a trust.
Correct.
When you make a trust,
Mhm.
everything stays out of the court.
Yes.
Because a trust is its own little company,
Yeah,
basically.
similar.
It's not a person
Correct.
that the judge has to sort of assist.
Mm-hmm.
So what is, in your experience, Odelia, what are the probates that go wrong?
Oh my, so many ways for probate to go wrong. A lot of times people do go through the effort of creating a beautiful, gorgeous trust, and they come into my office and I'm like, amazing. You have an amazing attorney that drafted this gorgeous trust. What's in it? And they just didn't go through that extra step of actually funding the trust. So if we don't have assets in a trust, then the trust is kind of meaningless.
And I'm just going to stop you there. Mm-hmm. Because what funding a trust is, just to make it clear, what funding a trust is changing the title of your house, any property you have, all your bank accounts, any asset that could be probated, correct?
Correct, yeah.
And how often, of the percentage of probate cases, how often is a trust unfunded?
I'm going to say there's a large percentage.
Is it 50?
I'm going to say, yeah, probably around 50%
Wow.
of our probates have a trust. And so certain assets have been moved in, or either no assets have been moved in. But there's usually, one or two assets that people forget about. Or sometimes what happens after someone passes away is we get new money coming in. For example, the IRS issues a refund or rebate to the individual. Or sometimes there's a settlement action. So there's money coming into the estate that we couldn't have anticipated. And that would, trigger a probate because, even though we took care of all the assets while someone was alive and we properly titled them and we funded the trust like we wanted to, we couldn't anticipate this new money coming in.
Like John Ritter's medical
Mhm.
malpractice
Yeah.
lawsuit.
That's exactly right.
But doesn't that mean that your will can leave everything to the trust?
Sure.
So therefore what happens is that settlement action goes into that will.
Mm-hmm.
That will leaves it to the trust.
Mhm.
It's called a pour over will.
Pour over will, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
when we establish a trust, one of the other things we do is we update the will, the last will and testament.
Mhm.
And we make that pour over into the trust so that in the unlikely event that we forget an asset or we get an asset coming in after death, we know that it's going to actually go through probate
Mhm.
through the will and end up in the trust where we have all of our rules and how we want everything to go.
But it's not really an unlikely event, is it, that we have left something out of the trust?
Well, when there are clients, it's unlikely.
Absolutely.
We do go through the formal process of talking about all of the beneficiary designation forms like we discussed, the bank accounts, looking at any real estate. Yeah,
Well, we do, but it's not our fault if the
Yes.
client doesn't
Well,
tell us about it.
of course.
And sometimes that happens also.
Yeah.
Now, Odelia, what happens like in a trust or a will? The parents get mad. I have so many friends who are, for whatever reason, dependent on their parents dying for them to have
Oh.
a good rest of their life. I don't understand it. And so they're really good to their parents, even though they don't like them,
Wow.
or because they don't want to be disinherited.
right.
So the question is, can you disinherit a child in the United States?
Yes, actually, in Florida, you can disinherit anyone except for your spouse. Right? Your spouse has some special rules that we create to protect spouses from each other mostly. But one can absolutely, you may disinherit your parents, your children, your siblings, your friends. There are some areas in this world where a certain percentage of your estate has to go to your children.
Well, England, I think.
England, right? A lot
Yeah.
of the Latin American countries also. So people are surprised when I tell them, oh, no, you're the boss, applesauce. You get to do whatever you want short of disinheriting your spouse. That
Right.
would require a postnuptial or prenuptial agreement to get around the homestead rules and all
Well,
of those.
explain that. So
Mhm.
Tom and my husband and I aren't getting along.
No, I'm
Well,
sorry
no,
to hear
no,
that.
I mean,
Just
This is-
kidding.
yeah. Well, actually don't kid. but the truth is, so many people, I know you can't disinherit a spouse in the state
Right.
of Florida,
Right.
but so many people don't know that.
I know.
And
I
it
get a
has-
lot of phone calls about that.
Right. And it has been proven time and time again.
Yeah.
Many people have tried it
Yes.
through trust,
Yes.
through
Yes. People get
amazing
creative.
vehicles.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Insurance,
Yes.
anything.
Yes.
And really, I think it was Mrs. Robbie, Joe
Mhm.
Robbie's
Yeah.
wife,
Yeah.
who proved to us all
Yeah.
that it didn't matter what your husband did.
Yeah.
You could take, it's your 30%, right? Your
Well,
equitable share.
Yes, you have a 1/3 interest if the person created a will.
Mhm.
And if they didn't create a will, then you have a half interest in the estate.
Oh, so ladies,
Mhm.
hey,
Mhm.
if he's really older,
Mhm.
don't get the will.
You are too funny.
But wait a second. If it's between the spouse and the kids,
Yes.
is it 50-50 then? And if
Well-
if he or she dies intestate,
Mhm.
and there's a widower or widow,
Mhm.
is it 50 for the widower and 50 for the kids?
Well, it would be whoever his beneficiaries are in the will. Right?
Oh,
So it could be someone else.
Okay.
It could be like that. Now, when we're talking about the homestead,
like the mistress? Yeah,
The
that's always
mistress.
pleasant. Who was that? Remember the man who was on the CBS Sunday show? And when he died, it turns out he had two families.
really,
Charles, oh, help me here.
I don't know.
Andres, you don't remember? No. Andres, our producer, is like, he's too young. But there was a man, he did these
Mhm.
wonderful travel shows.
Oh yeah.
I'm pretty sure it was a CBS. And when he died,
Get
it
to
turned
the-
out he had this whole other family.
Did they know about each other?
No.
Oh my.
No, she, huh?
Steve Irwin?
No, 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 no. Steve was the Australian who got stung by a stingray and died very suddenly. Bindi's father.
Mm.
But this guy worked for CBS, and I think he was a morning guy, and he died somewhat suddenly.
Yeah.
And he died with the other family. I think one was in Montana.
Oh my.
But I have to say, even though there was no, I mean, she had no rights as a spouse,
Right.
but nevertheless, she got money from the courts because they were her children.
Sure.
So talk a little about that. I mean, if you're only a child,
Yeah.
But not from a marriage, what happens there?
Well, in the case of Jerry Garcia, as you know from the Grateful Dead.
The Grateful Fish. From the fish.
To me, it was all a blur. That period.
I know. As we followed him across the country.
That was in a haze. So Jerry Garcia, he passed away. And he left his third wife actually as the executrix of his estate. And within a couple of months, there was about 15 million in the estate and about 50 million in claims against the estate.
50?
50.
Wow.
And one of the claims was from his daughter. And she had said that, she's not going to be getting her spousal support. And in Florida, a child can claim against the estate for child support.
Oh, how old was this?
She was about 16, 17.
Oh, so
she was
she
like
was
a teenager.
Okay.
But because of all the claims in the estate, she kind of figured that she wasn't going to be getting any of her, money.
Right.
So she wanted to claim her child support. And so there's a question, if the surviving parent doesn't go after the child support, can the child go after the child support? And in Florida, an emancipated child can go after their own child support from an estate. It's actually permissible.
Well, and so did she have to get, why don't you explain emancipated?
Emancipated is when a minor says that they are legal enough to be their own individual. So in Florida, if someone is under the age of 18, they're considered a minor, and a minor
Right.
has no rights. They can't sign contracts. They can't have assets. They're like a table.
Mm-hmm.
And if they do get assets, let's say someone leaves them in a, some kind of will or trust or as a beneficiary, then we have to go get a guardianship, because it's not assumed that a parent is going to be a legal guardian of a minor. So that surviving
The
parent,
good news.
the surviving
Ask Britney
parent,
Spears.
yeah, right. So the surviving parent has to go to court and get appointed as legal guardian, and then the minor child can get that money. Well, if the minor child is mature enough and almost 18, then they could do what's called emancipation, and they go to court and they say, look at me, I'm so great, I got good grades, I'm responsible, I should be emancipated. And the judge would say, all right, you're good to go. And they sign an order allowing the child to be able to have the rights of an 18-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
How about that? That reminds me of a Jodi Picoult. Picoult.
Oh,
her first book.
I used to love her.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. But her first big book was a 13-year-old who wanted to be emancipated
Yes.
because she'd been conceived solely to be the donator
yes.
to her older sister who had
Yes.
leukemia.
Uh-huh.
So she couldn't play sports. That was
Yes,
such
I
a good
remember.
book.
That was such a good book. Yes.
Yeah, and that was the first time it occurred to me that a kid might not want to be
Mhm.
their sibling's donor.
Yeah, my
You know?
brother's keeper. Yeah.
Yeah.
We have a family joke about that.
Which
because
is?
there's four of us, my brother who's 6 years younger than me, and then we have twins, boy and girl twins that are
Uh-huh.
18 years younger than me.
Oh.
So my brother teases that there are organ donors. Of course, it's just
Yeah,
a joke.
but that is it.
But we tease about it all the
Yeah,
time.
yeah. No,
I'm sure they'll love to see this on
We'll send it to them.
family joke.
Yeah. Oh, that's so funny. So, so the elective share is 30%. Now, someone like Prince,
Mhm.
when he died,
Mhm.
of course, a zillion people came out of the woodwork because he died intestate as well.
Yes.
And intestate means without a will.
Without a last will and testament. Yep.
So, And a bunch of people came up and claimed they were his children.
Yeah.
They had to take DNA tests,
Mhm.
and none of them were.
Yeah.
So all of his goes to his siblings, correct?
Well, it would go to his children, you know. I
But
think
he has no children.
Oh, even the really?
I don't think Prince has any children.
He didn't biologically, I mean, he didn't adopt any of them. I thought there was I don't know. But
Yeah.
yeah, if he doesn't have any legal
We're not the lawyers, so,
children, yeah.
so we haven't done the research.
If he hasn't legally adopted a child, and a lot of times we get situations where it's almost a legal adoption, and people will come forward and say, you know, there's 4 of us, but we've always had this one individual in our family, you know, and so she hasn't been formally adopted, but it's almost as though she was. And that's pretty much like a light switch. Either it's a formal adoption or it's not. It can't be an almost situation, and the courts will look for formal adoption papers for that to be a beneficiary of
So
an estate.
if you weren't formally adopted, you cannot be a beneficiary unless it's written in
Correct.
into the will.
Correct.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
What is the percentage, if you know this,
Mhm.
because I just thought of it, what is the percentage of people who die in the South Florida area where you and I practice without a will, who die intestate?
I'm going to say 50%.
50%.
I'm going to say 50%, which, you know, you would think 50% of people having a will is a lot versus 50% not having a will, which I think is not that many, because you have to really make a concerted effort to get a last will and testament. That means you have to go to a lawyer, you have to sit down, you have to disclose.
You can't write your own will?
I mean, it would be like filling your own cavity. Can you do it? Yes. Should you do it? Probably not. Because the reason we're doing a last will and testament is to make sure it works. What's the point of doing a last will that might work? You know, all the individual is doing is potentially creating problems for themselves. So sometimes it makes sense to actually spend the effort. You know, I say we take a little time and energy now to save a lot of time and energy later, right? And we want to make sure that we're doing it correctly. It would be like buying a insurance policy that may or may not work later.
Yeah, I gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
So 50%.
I would say so.
And what happens? I mean, how long does probate? I know in the Miami courts, a minimal probate is a year.
Well, since COVID, things became much faster for us, believe it or not.
Really?
Really. I was, surprised. We were always e-filing. So our court never met in person. We always
e-filing means electronic filing.
Electronic filing. So we never actually met in person unless we wanted our order signed.
Oh.
So the process would be I submit everything electronically. I would wait a couple of weeks to make sure the judge received it. And then I would have to schedule an ex parte hearing. Without ex parte means that the other side is not contesting anything.
Right. It's just you.
And then if the judge would see me, he would sign my order. But then came COVID. And all of a sudden, everybody was signing orders within 2-3 days. And I was like, Eureka, this is great. I don't have to go to court. Not that it was possible. But yeah, the process has significantly improved since COVID.
Isn't that funny? So
Yes.
we don't have to go back.
I would like for it not to. So we haven't seen a decrease yet. I say from the time we get all the information from our clients, everybody's name, all the assets, and I submit it to the court, it takes about 3 weeks for me to get a judicial signature or a judicial request for more information.
Okay.
Right? So within 3 weeks, we have direction from the judge in Broward, Miami, Palm Beach, and all of the counties.
Wow. That is so much better.
It's sped it up a little. Good news.
Yeah. So this question was posed to me. Actually, I have a video. I think it's going to be on my site. But the question is, can you go to your parents, like me? I have 2 siblings. And both mom and dad are dead, so it wouldn't matter. But can you go to your parents and say, you know, or like my brother, who's the baby, go to my parents and say, you know, Frances, she's the one who went to the private school. She got this, she got that, and you all did this for her, which you never did for me. Mm-hmm. Could you just give her less because, you know, you gave her all this other stuff during her life?
Yeah.
I mean, is it a parent's decision? Can the older, like if Matt did, just mentioned his name. Oops.
I love it.
If Matt did that to me and I found out about it after, if he had done it and that's why I inherited less, could I then go back and say that's not fair? There was undue influence. He was living with him. I'm just asking.
Yeah, that happens. We get a lot of times, family dynamics are such that there's usually one person in each family that takes care of mom and dad. And that's usually just how,
it works. Are. No. I see it all the time.
Whether they're elected or they take it on, they're the ones that take mom or dad to the attorney's office. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that child has a closer relationship with the parents, or in some instances has given up their life to take care of those parents. Mm-hmm. And those parents want to reward that child, or to the detriment of another child, want to punish another child that's not as involved in their lives. So that absolutely happens. What we do want to make sure is that it's the parent's decision. So quite often I ask the child to leave the room and I speak directly to the parent, make sure that that is their wishes. I listen to the stories. I take copious notes so that later, should anyone question those issues, we'll have, on this date, the no good Nick child did this, and on this date, the good child did that. And then the other thing that I really do is I encourage the parents to share that information with all of the children so that it's not a surprise. Because, go on.
How often is it a surprise even after you encourage the parents?
Not that often. We do a lot of talking about it. How are they going to feel? What are they going to say? Should they know about this? Should I email it? Should you email it? Who should tell them? So that, I find that the fighting happens not when it's not even, but when it's unmet expectations.
Okay.
That's usually when people pick up, the sword because they feel like it should have been one way versus another way. So even if it's not equitable, that's okay. As long as everybody knows and has an opportunity to air their grievances while everyone is alive, that eliminates conflict.
That's so funny. People who watch me on video know that I've written this book, and I write about this in the book. When we were doing mom and dad's estate, I was really in charge because I'm the attorney in the family.
Sure.
And I was also, it was an honor for me, truthfully, to take care of mom and dad. So none of that was an issue. And it's not that my brother, he certainly was in there helping when he could, and his family. But I remember we had cousins, my mother's side of the family, her brother, and their family got totally, the 4 children didn't speak to each other over my uncle's dementia and after their death because of my uncle's dementia and the fact that they thought that the youngest of the children who'd been in business with mom and dad, who watched mom and dad, who lived next to mom and dad, they felt as though he had sold the assets and kept the money for himself.
Yeah.
And of course, when you went through the business, that wasn't what happened at all.
Sure.
But they didn't believe it. They just felt like he had done something with it. And so at the end of it, there was nothing to inherit. So when it came time for us, we promised ourselves. And I remember because I thought to myself, I really have done a lot of work here. And so I mentioned to my brother and my sister that, maybe I should get something
PRT.
For the legal work. Mm-hmm. Well, they didn't think that was a good idea at all. So I shut up.
Yeah, sure.
My family's much more important.
100%.
Yeah, than, a couple $1,000.
Well,
even though it's $10,000 worth of work, I want everyone to know it's $10,000 worth of work.
I hear you. What I will say about that is, when I deal a lot with that, and sometimes I try to conceptualize other people's behavior. What I'll say is some families or some people don't have sadness in their Rolodex of emotions. Mm-hmm. And what they do is they turn sadness into other emotions because especially, we don't allow certain groups of people or certain genders to really experience the depth of sadness and to really cry and be, sad. So, but we do encourage other behaviors like jealousy or anger or
envy.
Those are readily at people's disposal. So instead of, feeling sad and expressing sadness, they feel sad and then they express other emotions. And that's really what we see. But it's underneath there is sadness, I think. And that's how I kind of process people's behaviors that don't seem rational in these moments, and sometimes it's momentarily and sometimes it lasts, but that's really what I think is happening. Yeah. But it happens, and we got to move on.
Well, and as I said, sometimes you think too much of yourself too, which might have been my problem in that particular case.
I think that you handled it perfectly.
Well, I mean,
just to bring it out there, if everybody was on board and said, yes, you worked hard, why don't you take the PR fee and certainly the court filing fees and the costs that you had to incur, then but sometimes people also don't understand what's involved in the mechanics of the probate of the estate planning.
No. And it's not like, I mean, the fact that I made $15,000 for mom and dad by suing the insurance company.
There you go.
Yeah. Those long-term care people, you've got to watch them. You've got to count along with them.
Yes.
Because
don't mess with the lawyer.
That's right. But
she wrote the book.
Well, actually, my book's about living. But you need to go to the lawyer to live well, right? And don't you agree? And if she doesn't, too bad, right?
I agree completely.
I mean, the book that I have, what it's really about is how to live life, your best life ever, the last 30 years or 40 years, whatever it is after 60. But to live that best life, you have to go to the lawyer first.
Sure.
You totally have. It's like, I tell people, it's like going out in the rain. Yeah. If you take the umbrella, it never rains. It's when you don't take the umbrella that it rains.
Sure. And that's a good point.
Yeah. And so how many estates do we do where they don't come in and sign? Yeah. I remember one particular attorney,
Really?
Here in Miami, I'm not going to mention names, but his medicine, he was taking one of those medicines where a side effect could be cancer, but it was an easy cancer. In other words, they catch it quickly. So you have to go every 3 or 4 months, right, for the scan. That was part of the side effect of the medication. And, when you think it's going to save your life, you'll do anything. So, I'll go for a scan every 4 months. Of course, he didn't. So he went after 8 months and, oh, my gosh, he had cancer. But they still didn't think it was a problem. Everything was fine. He was in the midst of a partnership agreement. He was in the midst of signing his estate, and he was scared to sign his estate. He was scared if he signed his estate, he would die.
Yeah.
So he didn't sign it, and he died anyway. With an estate.
We're probably all going to die.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and the fact that it was an attorney.
Yeah.
I was like, well, wait a second. One way or the other, you're going to die.
Right.
Yeah,
avoiding is a strategy that we can employ. There's avoiding. It's in our
plus his the partnership agreement for his law firm was also an issue.
Yeah.
Because it too hadn't been signed because the estate had to be signed first.
Yeah, sure.
Oh my gosh.
It happens. It definitely happens.
Don't you love Odelia?
Yes.
It happened.
You can't faze me. You could have. I feel like I have heard it all. You try me. You call me up and you tell me and I'm like, yep, okay. So here's how we can fix it.
Oh wow.
Yeah, there's always a solution.
How can you fix something like that in a minute or less?
Easily. Well, beforehand or after?
After he dies.
So there's a probate, of course.
Right.
And then we would have to get the partners and the surviving spouse or children involved in the conversation to make sure that they can all get along. And sometimes what we do with, I find, is to hear what people want, because usually people want different things. And we can kind of make them happy. One person wants to preserve the name of the entity, right? That's important to people. And one person wants cash, right? Because they need money liquidity. So we're able to accomplish both things and still create, an agreement amongst the people. So we definitely try hard to listen to hear what people want, because people will come at it fighting and they don't even know why they're fighting.
Right. They're just angry that they're even there.
Back to sadness. Yeah. So we try to peel back and say, okay, okay, what's going to make you happy here? What are you trying to get out of this? And then we go back to the other side and say, this is what they care about. Now tell me what you care about, and see if there's,
Right.
meeting of the minds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And almost always is there.
Usually, because the alternative, honestly, is I stop my probate work because I'm not a litigation attorney. So
Yeah,
if
then
if we started the probate and then people start fighting, then everybody gets their own litigation attorneys.
Right.
And those people,
$700 an hour, guys.
those people are expensive.
$550 with a lawyer discount. But that.
Yeah. That usually gets
Just like
people
that.
talking. And, where's that money coming from? Well,
Mhm.
it's coming from the estate that they would both
Right.
be inheriting. So when we position it that way, and I say to people, this kind of law, this fighting, it's not winner take all. So it's not like, oh,
Yeah.
I won, therefore the loser has to pay for my legal fees.
Yeah.
Oh, no. The legal fees come out of the pot that they're trying to share.
Right.
So it doesn't make sense to go into war with someone that you have so much, invested
you
with.
both are losing.
Yeah. So when you position it that way, then people are like, oh, then what I really want is just this. And
Yeah.
it's like, okay, we can probably get you that or something close.
Right.
Yeah.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Well, Odelia, any last words, any last piece of advice for people who think, oh gosh, yeah, maybe I need a will? First, I'm just going to, as Odelia said earlier, you're going to die. Okay.
Usually, yes. Usually,
What do you
yes.
mean usually?
Unless someone knows something I don't,
Right.
know.
Well, so far,
never
I
say
don't know
never.
anyone who hasn't died. In fact, even though I knew mom and dad were going to die, it's still a shock.
Yeah.
It's still a shock.
Right.
Well,
I found that everyone kind of got a shock recently. Everybody's
Yeah.
mortality was a little bit, I've known all along. So for me, it wasn't a big surprise. I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
You guys are just realizing now that, it's a finite amount of time. So
it is.
it does make sense to do a little bit of planning. And, a lot of times some of this stuff doesn't have to be as big of a deal,
Right.
because when people call, they're like, well, what do we do? I don't know. How does it go? And it's an intake form, which I'm sure you've got too. And my intake form isn't very invasive. I'm not really looking for assets. I'm really just trying to understand who the important people are in their lives.
Right.
Who do they love? Are they married? How many kids? And then we schedule our intake meeting. It usually takes about 30 minutes. It's
Wow.
not very, long. And at that point, I'm listening for cues to hear if we need any kind of special needs trust, or I'm really trying to pick up on the family dynamics to see if there are any issues that we need to address in our estate plan. So one of the things I'll ask is, how are the kids doing? Are they happily married? Do we like their spouses? What do they do for a living? Yeah.
Because, and let me just stop you there. As I recall, if I inherit from mom and dad, that is not my husband's.
Correct.
It's mine.
Yes.
I have to actually gift it
Mm-hmm.
to my husband, which no court can.
Or commingle it.
Right. In other words,
Commingle.
buy a house together.
Yeah.
Or any of that sort of thing. Then it goes away. But other than that, if it's my pot of money, even he has no right to it.
Mm-hmm. Well, yes, what I'll say about divorce is kind of like war. And when people go to war
of the
together,
Roses.
it's not like they say, "Oh, I'm only going to ask for what I'm entitled to." I'm
Yeah.
not going to go beyond what's mine. People will go after everything.
Sure.
So if I do hear in a conversation that there's a child and they've got a no good nick of a spouse
Mhm.
that we don't like and that we want to make sure doesn't inherit anything, then I will make sure to tighten up some of my documents, some of the trust work, to make sure that doesn't happen.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we listen for issues with addiction. We listen for issues with mental illness. We
Mhm.
listen for issues with family dynamics. Oh, my kids hate each other. Well, that's very important for me to know. I wouldn't want to put them, we'd want someone else managing assets for them. So I try really hard to listen for those things. And my intake form also has questions leading for that.
Right.
Is anyone collecting government benefits? Is anyone suffering from a disability we should know
Mhm.
about? And so we do a little bit of that. But that's really what my intake process is trying to understand if we need to do extra planning in the plan.
Right.
And then we draft the documents.
Yeah. It's pretty.
Voila.
Then it's easy.
Yeah.
pretty
Once I have the
easy.
info, the documents are there for them to review, and then
Right.
we execute.
And I'm just going to say, I know a lot of people go to LegalZoom, I think, or on the internet. There's plenty of wills and trusts and all of that out there, because oftentimes I get them
Yes.
after they
Yes.
have already signed these and they didn't really understand what they were signing.
Yeah.
So if you do it that way, that's fine.
Mhm.
But then when you're really getting serious about it, at a minimum, have the attorney take a look
Review.
at it.
Yes.
I mean, and I will say, as an attorney, I know we always have to add our 2 cents, but
One
but
more
it won't.
thing.
But it won't cost quite as much, right?
I think so. I think it makes more sense to create a plan with an attorney that you know isn't going to be challenged, that gives you everything you need, that talks about all of your assets to make sure they're probate proof, right?
Mhm.
Because the basic documents that you get online is going to be great, for the basic documents, but you don't really do the estate planning in the form of making sure it's probate proof,
Right.
right?
Right. Most people don't know the difference. It's so
Right.
true.
So, we've got this will that's shaky at best. Shaky. We know there's a pretty good chance we're going to end up in probate court because we haven't gone through the exercise of thinking about each asset and how to best title it to avoid
Right.
probate. And then we find ourselves in court with litigation attorneys,
$700 an hour.
and that could all have been kind of circumvented if but I get it, because like I said, estate planning is one of those areas where we combine not only one's mortality but also one's family dynamics and their financial situation
Yeah.
all into one conversation.
Yeah.
And if you don't have an
With
issue,
therapists.
yeah, but if you don't have an issue with your mortality, for sure you've got an issue with your finance. And if you don't have an issue with finances, for sure you've got an issue with your family. So it lends itself into like this, that's why we try to strip away some of the emotional components and make it, all right, this is spending a little bit of energy and effort now to save a lot of energy and effort later.
And money. And Odelia, what a pleasure
Thank
it
you so
was to
much.
have
This
you
is so
here.
much fun.
Thank you.
Is our time up? I
Yes,
feel like we've been
yes,
talking
it
for 2
is.
minutes.
And why don't you just give us all your phone number and
Sure.
email so we know where to reach you?
You can find me at Odelia Goldberg. I think I'm the only Odelia in Florida.
Uh-huh.
You put Odelia.
So it's Odelia. I've been calling you Odelia. so
No,
it's like
it's
Odette
fine.
in Swan Lake. I
Yes.
told you that.
It
Yeah,
could be Odelia too. I respond to everything. And it's www.ogoldberglaw. I
O
write
Goldberg, because
Mhm.
my emails were,
O
I'd
Goldberg
forgotten
Law.
the O. O Goldberg Law.
And I write a blog once or twice a month, whenever the
It's a great
spirit
blog.
moves me,
Yeah.
talking about estate planning and pop culture,
Yeah.
learning from some celebrity mistakes. I love to elevate the ridiculous.
Odelia, thank you.
Thank
And
you.
as you all know, I'm Frances Reeves. Parent your parents, and I will see you again next month.
Thank you.